Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Everyday Woo, the place where we talk about the magical, mystical experiences with the everyday person. I'm Amy from Cultivating Silence, and today my guest is Tim Sippola. Tim has been a psychologist, I believe, for 50 years, but he'll correct me if I got that wrong. And as far as I know, Tim is no stranger to the woo. So we will find out what Tim has to share with us. So, first of all, how are you doing today, Tim?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good, I'm good. Thank you. So, is it true? I mean, what I know of you being a friend of yours, I would say you are no stranger to the woo. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And for everybody watching, could you even kind of give a definition of what is your definition of quote unquote woo?
Uh, I would say it's really those experiences that are outside, probably what I would call paranormal. They're experiences that are actually probably a lot more common than people talk about, but I think they're experiences that don't fall within the normal range of what people think is appropriate or acceptable, even socially acceptable. I think there's some fear usually around even talking about these sorts of things. So I'm really glad you're doing this. Just because people don't want to be thought of as, crazy or woo.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that term actually because I think it's good to have a sense of humor, but I agree with your definition, and that is the whole purpose of this to kind of make it less threatening, less unusual, because I too believe it is something that everybody experiences. So, if we could jump right in, if you would be willing to share one of maybe, I don't know, your favorite woo experience that you'd be willing to share. You might have, one that you don't want to share.
Um, yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the beginning. I came up in a very strict educational system. I was really trained, I would say, to be a scientist. And that meant if you can't see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, it isn't real. Or if you can't use some extension of those senses to measure it, it's not real. And so I was very blocked in terms of accepting any kind of thing that was outside the realm of what other people were experiencing or what other people had ever experienced themselves. So I think the very first thing that I'd like to share, I feel comfortable sharing. A friend of mine was killed, and I was at the funeral. He was an extremely popular person. This is back in 1980. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is back in I guess it was 74, 1974. And I was at the funeral, and um, there were the funeral home itself seated like 250 people. There was a lobby, there was no closed circuit TV. So there were actually hundreds of people out on the street. It was a beautiful day, fortunately. But, and I was sitting, he was like my brother, and I was sitting up in the first row and his dad was right next to me. And his father was just heartbroken, and he was crying, moaning, wailing, really at the top of his lungs. And I was very uncomfortable with it. And I just made an excuse and I said, I have to use the restroom. This was before the funeral started. So I went back to the lobby and there were two friends of mine and I was trash talking about, what I would do to the guy if they caught him. Uh, and suddenly above my head, about maybe 2 feet on the right side, this basketball size glowing globe of golden white light with this blue aura around it just appeared, and it was very bright, and it shocked me, and I looked up really quickly, and my two friends, which were right in front of me, they looked up and then they looked back at me like, what are you looking at? And I said, oh, I thought I saw something, and I didn't acknowledge what was going on. And then I was looking, the lobby was absolutely packed. There was probably over 100 people there. And we're all standing basically shoulder to shoulder. And nobody else could see this. It was just hovering right above my head on the right side. And I was instantly just flooded with feelings of unconditional love. I just loved everybody there. And what was really most alarming to me was this thought just kept coming through my head. If he could only be here, he'd never kill again. If he could only be here, he'd never kill again. This went on for like,
Meaning the person who killed your friend.
yes, exactly. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Um, and I, I just was, I mean, a moment before this, I'd been trash talking vengeance, basically. And now suddenly, and this was the very first time I ever really experienced just unconditional love. It was so new to me, and I was astounded by the experience. And it was actually pretty humbling, really. I just felt so blessed. But this thought, I mean, when the thought started, the whole experience lasted maybe 2 minutes, and I was trying to act normal and with my friends, but it just kept coming through my head. If he could only be here, and I suddenly realized, oh, he did what he did out of fear. He did what he did out of ignorance. That was really the most important aspect of it, that he just had no, and if he could only be here, meaning half the people in the lobby were crying, and I would say at least half the people in the funeral home itself were just crying. This was such a tragedy, and of course, you could hear his dad still out in the lobby, and so the point was that if this person that had killed my friend could witness the depth of caring and the depth of love that people felt for him, uh, he wouldn't have done it. But it was clear in my consciousness, it was clear that he just didn't have an inkling. His whole background just really got him oriented to, I want money and I don't want to witness. And so I was just flooded with forgiveness for him. I wouldn't even call it forgiveness. It was just this understanding that, we're all on this path to greater and greater consciousness. And this person was kind of just starting out at the bottom rung. And so it was a very, very transformative experience. However, immediately after it ended, I just clammed up. I wouldn't tell anybody about it. I questioning my own sanity and whether, I had imagined this whole thing. I knew I hadn't, but it just was so outside my normal sphere of experience that I couldn't accept it. And I literally was denying it.
Mhm.
Till about a month later, and that's when another experience happened that led me not to deny it. And so I've come a long way in terms of accepting these sorts of experiences.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I mean, that's a huge woo experience for the first one, as far as I can tell, from my own personal experience. That's a big one. And first, this is a silly question, but I just wanted to clarify. I was a little confused. When you were first in the bathroom I think you were in the restroom with your two friends,
No,
with
I was in the lobby. I met them.
I'm sorry. Okay. So when you were in the lobby and it was you and your two friends and you first noticed it, did you say your friends actually saw it at first as well and said, "What was that?"
They saw me jerking.
Oh, that's why they,
And
okay.
they looked up and then they looked at me like, why were you looking up there like that?
Thank you. Yes. So, and I guess part of the reason I wanted to ask that is because often when we have these woo experiences, we have no corroboration from anybody else. And
Yeah.
I thought you got really lucky that these two guys also, but then you did say nobody in the lobby later noticed. So you were on your own with what you saw. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add 17 years later,
Mhm.
meditating on my back patio, and with no warning, this ball of light appeared again. And this time I heard his voice. The first time it was just this thought, if he could only be here, he'd never kill again. But the second time, had my eyes shut. I was meditating, and all of a sudden, I thought somebody had snuck up on me with a searchlight because it was so powerful. And I snapped my head up, and immediately I recognized this ball. I've only seen it twice, and immediately I heard his voice, and he said, I've never left you. I'll always be with you. Heaven's just a shift in consciousness. If you need my help, just ask. And obviously, it's still moving to me. And there's been many times I've asked for his help and got it.
Wow.
And that experience, I just started sobbing that day. I couldn't stop crying for like 30 minutes. And I had really kind of just never grieved. I never grieved his death,
Pause.
because
Pause. Why did you not grieve his death? Because,
I because I didn't want to feel that pain.
oh,
I didn't want to feel it. Since then, that was, geez, man, that was quite a long time ago. But since then, I've really come to recognize how important it is to feel every feeling we have, and it's really been a very important part of my practice ever since. So,
beautiful.
yeah, but I didn't even realize. I just thought, well, I'm over it. Um, so yeah.
I apologize because I'm gonna give a little interpretation here, and please correct it. I'm often wrong when I'm interpreting, I'm sure, but when the reason I asked because it's because what I was feeling was because of the experiences you had, it seemed as though you maybe had no need to grieve because he showed you where he was, and although you didn't hear his voice until 17 years later, so I guess I was interpreting it as if you had heard that voice right away, you maybe wouldn't need to grieve, but you didn't. Yeah.
No, the first time I just didn't know what that ball of light was.
Yeah.
I had no comprehend. I had nothing, no framework with which to evaluate it. It just, and like I said, it was just a thought that just kept running through my head. I wasn't trying to think that. It was a surprise to me. So, but no, I didn't hear his voice the first time at all. I had no sense that it was him or his consciousness or anything. So.
Right. Okay. So, if I may, I want to touch on a couple of parts of that experience, and I'd love for you to share your thoughts. I wrote down a couple things. First of all, you experienced unconditional love through that experience. You said that it humbled you. And then I wrote down also, because you described it, you didn't use this word, but you described, I believe, having a wide open empathy, like unconditional empathy, including for your friend's killer. So unconditional love, humbling, and empathy. The reason I wrote them down is because I believe those are at least empathy and unconditional love, and probably the humility as well, are often parts of what can happen to us, the ways in which we are changed by a quote unquote woo experience. So if that made any sense, I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts on those ideas.
Absolutely. A month later, I had a second experience, which I won't go into, but that ball didn't reappear again. But I again experienced unconditional love, and that experience kind of frightened me. I was just getting into this kind of stuff, and uh, that. So, but when I had that experience, I actually was trying to bargain my way out of it. And and
Can you share some of the specifics of that? And you certainly don't have to, of course.
okay. Well, I'll say this. I was an atheist at the time.
Okay.
That was the only thing that made sense to me at that time. I was super logical, very intellectual. Um, as I said, a scientist. If it's not sensible, it's not real. And this kind of stuff just didn't fit in my worldview. And so, in this experience a month later, I was trying to comfort my girlfriend whose father had just died. And she was very concerned that now he knew because he was in heaven, he knew all the feelings she had towards him, which were not very pleasant.
Okay.
And yeah, she just didn't want him to know her true feelings towards him. And she'd always hidden them, probably for safety's sake, actually. But so I was trying to convince her when you die, you die, the lights are out, end of the story. And see, um, if I'd have known that that was my friend David, I would have had a much harder time trying to convince her of that. And like I said, I had just totally gone into denial about it. Well, in this experience, I was trying to comfort her, and I suddenly heard a voice, and the voice said, use her language, meaning use her frame of reference. And I said, okay, if your dad is in heaven, then he perfectly understands why you have all these feelings towards him. And he wouldn't want you to be guilt tripping yourself like you are. He'd want you to go on with the rest of your life and make the best of it and learn whatever you can from your feelings towards him, but just go on and make the best of your life. And as I was sitting on the edge of her bed, she was laying down, and in the dark, I saw this dark black form just rise out of her body, and it went up through the ceiling. And I was sitting there just like, what the, how do you see a black form in a dark room? It just was, I couldn't, I was just baffled. And then, and only then did I go, wait a minute. Who said that? Where did that voice come from? And I'm just sitting there, just puzzled and, baffled by the whole thing. And suddenly, from my right hand, this uh, golden blue light, golden white light with this blue edge to it, just starts coming out of my hand. And then it was like fire. It crept up and covered my whole body. And then that light began emanating into the room and it filled the whole room. It was not like electric light because it was like this light was superimposed. I could still see, like in a dark room, you can make out the figure of like the furniture or stuff. And this light was not illuminating the furniture or the stuff in the room. It just was it was really pretty much golden white light. And again, now I just felt this unconditional love. And I started tearing up because I was just so grateful and humbled and like, why me? What did I do to deserve this? And and suddenly the voice comes back. And keep in mind, I was an atheist. The voice says, "Heal the sick, raise the dead." Well, I was raised in church, and I recognize that phrase. And he said that three times. He said, "Heal the sick, raise the dead." And suddenly, um, Jesus appeared in the room about 10 feet away, had his back to me and his hands up in the air like this. And he starts lowering them to the shoulders of a man that was kneeling in front of him. And as he's lowering his hands, my hands both of them became supercharged with this healing energy. And now I started freaking out because,
Just then?
well, before that, feeling of unconditional love was just
Yes.
blissful. It was peaceful. I was not, I was surprised by the experience and like, how is this happening? But I was not frightened in any sense. But when my hands got supercharged, all I could think, this was the last semester of my undergrad, and I had just gotten accepted to grad school. And so this is going on, and this voice comes and says, "Heal the sick, raise the dead." And I've got this supercharged energy. And I mean it, Amy. If I thought if I put my hands on a dead man, they would literally, by this power that was just coming through my hands, they would rise from the dead. And I was like, whoa, this, just doesn't fit with my atheism. And I thought, I didn't know. I thought, I didn't know how long this light was going to shine out of me. And I thought I was going to have to walk down Main Street healing the sick, raising the dead. I thought that was what I was being told to do. And I started babbling. I just started saying, but I wanted to be a psychologist. I'm a psychologist. And um,
Mhm.
so anyway, I just was in a pretty anxious state at that point. I still was feeling this unconditional love, but this anxiety was like overriding it. And finally, the voice comes back. I say finally, it probably was only 10 seconds later, but it seemed like an eternity. He comes back and he says, let it be, let it be, let it be. And that was all I heard, but I just instantly comprehended that you don't have to. I kept saying, what am I supposed to do? But I wanted to be a psychologist. I comprehended that it just meant let it be meant you don't have to do anything. Just accept this experience for what it is and don't deny it. And it was almost like I saw this finger pointing to the month before when this ball of light appeared, and it was clear I wasn't supposed to deny that either. And so um, I thought that was the bargain of my lifetime. So okay, because as soon as he said, let it be, and I got that clear understanding, the light began retracting and it disappeared off my feet, my legs, my body, and finally it was just coming out of this hand again. And then it just went out. And my girlfriend saw the light filling the room, but she did not hear the voice. She did not see Jesus. And so I just sat there and told her what happened. Um, and and finally, she just said, I haven't slept for 36 hours. Please, I just need to go to sleep. And
Hmm.
I said, okay. So I said, I'm going to go tell your roommate, who was a good friend of mine too. And I told the roommate, and she said, she just looked at me. I told her the whole story. She just looked at me and she said, say, did you get the history notes from class today?
Wow. Okay, so there you go. There's a response that
Right.
makes us all retract,
Yep.
not want to share these experiences. And yet, I believe we are all becoming more and more open to these types of experiences. And I think it's so important that we begin, or I would say continue, to share the what I would call reality, that life is magical and mystical, and again, there's an experience that makes us all say, "Oh, no, I'm not gonna reveal that. That's crazy." And yet, here you are, a psychologist who has had many woo experiences, and you're not crazy. At least I don't think you're crazy. I don't think you think you're crazy, and I don't think any of your patients think you're crazy. Um, and there's one other thing I want to say just to everyone watching. You know, Tim is a PhD, and these experiences to me are like the PhD level of the woo experiences. So, I hope that anybody and everybody who's ever had the tiniest little experience might come on the show and talk with me. You don't have to have the big, things that have happened to Tim, just the smallest of the small. I think they're all important, but these are incredible experiences that, as you've said, I'm sure they changed you in many ways, but it certainly opened you up to unconditional love.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, for saying what you just finished saying. I could only agree. What's really important is people that recognize their intuitive capacity, their ability to know things without knowing how they know them, using their five physical senses or however many we count now. But yeah, it's so important that people really start to acknowledge, wow, I've had woo experiences, things that happened to me that I couldn't explain using my five physical senses, or I suddenly knew something that I don't know how I knew it. And so, yeah, I hope that people really use your forum to express whatever has happened to them, because I think there's a great, this is actually the first time I've shared those two experiences in a public forum. And, I had an experience this past weekend, and it just made me realize, man, I gotta quit being so afraid to share. And I've shared with lots of people on an individual, one-on-one basis where I knew I could trust them. But this was my first. And I'm doing this because I've become absolutely convinced how important it is to share. I love the idea of your forum here. I just love it.
Thank you very much. And I'm honored that you would reveal these things to a larger audience with me, because that is the reason to do this, because I think it's important too. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim. There's other things that I want to ask you, but this actually feels like a good kind of wrap up moment. But if you'll come back, I'm just going to put this out as a teaser. I would love to ask you how these types of experiences have affected the way that you work with clients, if at all, and or not that I would want you to reveal names ever, do any or many of your clients share with you that, oh yeah, like in secret, like, yeah, I've had, again, of course, we wouldn't out anybody unless they themselves wanted to come and share. But, again, just to say, I think everybody experiences this. So.
Great. Yeah. Well, I'd be happy to come back.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you everyone for watching. We will have more episodes, and you can find us on YouTube, and maybe other places too in the future. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Much love. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.